Groundhogs and hedgehogs. What an unlikely pair. One lives in Europe, and the other lives here in North America. Yet for centuries, both were believed to possess a remarkable ability to predict the weather. Long before meteorologists and satellites or smartphone apps, people watched these animals for signs that winter was ending and spring was on its way. Most of us recognize Punxsutawney Phil. Every February 2nd, crowds gather, television cameras roll, and millions wait to see whether he'll see his shadow. But very few know that this Pennsylvania tradition actually began centuries ago in another continent. As a lifelong Pennsylvanian, I've always enjoyed Groundhog Day, but I began researching its history, and I discovered that there was much more to this celebration than just a weather prediction. So Groundhog Day is far more than a quirky weather prediction ceremony. It is the product of centuries of cultural development that began with Celtic seasonal celebrations. It evolved through Christian traditions and ultimately became a uniquely American custom in Pennsylvania. Today I'd like to invite you to travel with me across 2,000 years of history. We'll begin in Ireland, we'll move through Germany, and finish right here in Pennsylvania. So our journey is going to begin in Ireland. Ireland planted the earliest seeds of what would eventually become Groundhog Day. Our story begins with the ancient Celtic festival known as Imbolc. According to Interfaith America, Imbolc was celebrated around February 1st and marked the midpoint between winter and spring. For ancient people, winter wasn't simply inconvenient. Food supplies were running low, livestock struggled to survive, and everyone looked for signs that the warmer days were approaching. Imbolc became a celebration of hope, marked because of its gradual return of the light and new life. And the festival eventually became associated with Regent, a figure connected with renewal and new beginnings. People lit fires and candles as symbols that winter could not last forever. Most importantly, they carefully observed nature, believing it offered clues about the changing seasons. So as Christianity spread throughout Europe, these seasoned traditions were not abandoned. They were given new meaning. Christianity preserved many of these same themes of hope and light. And many of the customs that were associated with Imbolc became connected with St. Bridget's Day on February 1st. And the following day was known as Candlemas. According to the Library of Congress, Candlemas celebrates the presentation of Jesus in the temple. Candles became powerful symbols because Christians viewed Christ as the light of the world. The symbolism remained remarkably similar. Jesus as light overcomes darkness, and spring eventually overcomes winter. People also continued watching the weather. One traditional saying declared, "If Candlemas be fair and bright, winter will have another flight." Without winter forecasts, these sayings became practical ways people tried to anticipate the remainder of winter. Eventually, these traditions crossed an ocean, with people seeking a new life. So German immigrants carried this weather tradition into Pennsylvania. And during the 18th and the 19th centuries, many German immigrants settled throughout Pennsylvania. History.com editors explain that they brought their folklore with them. And in Europe, we often watched a hedgehog appear from its winter shelter, but Pennsylvania had few hedgehogs. So the settlers adapted. They substituted a groundhog. And the tradition remained the same, but the animal changed. If the groundhog saw its shadow, winter would continue. If it didn't, spring was believed to arrive early. What began as a simple folklore eventually became one of Pennsylvania's best-known traditions. Pennsylvania transformed an old European custom into an international celebration. The first official Groundhog Day celebration in Punxsutawney took place in 1887. According to the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club, Punxsutawney Phil became the official weather prognosticator. And today, thousands gather every February 2nd at Gobbler's Knob. Visitors travel from around the world, and television crews broadcast the event internationally. And we can't forget the 1993 movie called Groundhog Day that introduced the tradition to millions more people. What began as an ancient seasonal celebration has become one of Pennsylvania's cultural identity. So, as we follow this tradition across the centuries and the continents, let's bring our journey to a close. Groundhog Day is much more than a humorous weather prediction. It is the product of centuries of cultural development that connected ancient Europe with modern Pennsylvania. Today, we've traveled from the Celtic festival of Imbolc to the Christian observances of St. Bridget's Day in Candlemas, and to German immigrants who carried their traditions across the Atlantic, and finally to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where these traditions continue every February 2nd. So, who would have imagined that a hedgehog and a groundhog could connect Ireland, Germany, and Pennsylvania? Over the centuries, this simple tradition crossed cultures, crossed an ocean, and found a home right here in Pennsylvania. So, the next time Punxsutawney Phil steps out of his burrow, don't just look for a shadow, but look for the story behind the shadow.